Hi, we're the Infamy Fantasy Esports team, and we're holding fantasy esports contests at infamy.gg all month, so join that. But today we're talking about the Overwatch League's approach to solving the stale meta problem that most games face eventually. So, after being scarred by the negative fan reaction from Season 2 of the Overwatch League's never ending GOATS meta with three tanks, three supports, they implemented a 2-2-2 lock, so two damage characters would have to be played. And then for season three, they brought in hero pools, which is basically league mandated character bans that change each week, with two damage, one support, and one tank randomly banned for the week's matches. The higher play rate the character had, the in the 2 weeks prior, the higher likelihood they would be banned, but no hero bans 2 weeks in a row. The idea was to constantly switch up the meta so the audience never got bored watching the same comps mirrored into each other over and over again. And I think it largely worked. There's like much less mirror matches, and we get to see different teams trend to different styles and how they clash. But it also led to a decline in overall match quality a lot of the time, with some teams like fumbling the bag for the week and unable to figure out the meta, and then end up putting up an embarrassing performance that week. So, Jake, what do you think? Are hero pools good or bad for the Overwatch League
I
scene as a whole?
I think where they ended up right before this last tournament was like fantastic. It's kind of like a good balance of both because uh, having hero pools allows, especially like the lower to mid-table teams that are kind of vying for like those kind of like play-in or like wild card spots for playoffs at the end of the season, it kind of like allows them to hone in some of their problems. And like I feel like when you have too many characters to choose from, like you're kind of like forced off your comfort picks. There's so many variables that they might not have enough time to kind of see what isn't working and be able to like kind of A B some things and figure out
Hmm.
like what isn't clicking. Like um, even though my boys are utter trash right now, the uprising, just knowing that fusions isn't gonna didn't have to play Arista at all, just doesn't have to touch it because it wasn't available this past week. But just being able to have at least some stability with him on his comfort pick of Rhine, and then trying to build a comp around that, I think is a great starting point for the teams that aren't just like have like multiple years of chemistry between the players and the roster on just being able to like trust each other, like especially with the uprising there, just have the constant flux of people coming in and out for various reasons. But it just kind of like helps them, just like kind of get a foot in the water essentially, and just find some strong footing against some of these more well-established teams.
Yeah, instead of just getting pummeled against like the top goats team every week after week
Mm-hmm.
because you can't figure it out, and you're never going to be able to figure out like getting some change.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
has an argument that it can help the competitive
Mm-hmm.
scene rather than just making it all chaos and
Yeah.
random.
So yeah, going back off of season two, they were good at initially at Goats because Fusion's leadership and like his experience with Goats of being on Team UK, smashing Team USA at that World Cup last year, and
Pretty
then
useful.
eventually they quickly fell behind because they just couldn't keep up players, roster, skill wise, various reasons. But even if they started to like completely switch away from just going into that mirror matchup of goats and trying something crazy like the hunters were doing, I feel like they're by the time they found something that might have worked, they would have been completely out of the picture. So their best option was to just stick with goats. And I think with hero pools, the kind of rotating certain characters in and out kind of allowed for some teams to stay relevant and just like creating
Yeah.
more. It gives like games more stakes because you never know who could win. It could be a crazy upset. But I think the best teams like the Shocks, the Dragons, and so are gonna most likely win out their matches 9 times out of 10, depending on what even with
All
various
right.
heroes.
So Blake, what do you think is more important for esports? Like the entertainment value of like avoiding having the same comps go against each other over time, or the like competitive integrity of making sure that the best team wins and it's not just thrown off by some random hero bans each week?
Honestly, it depends on execution, right? So like you assume like having a variance in play is important, right, for the viewer experience because that's what everybody wants, right? They want a different experience every time they watch, or at least interesting, right? what we were seeing like we were talking about in season 2, the quality of matches starts to drop off when these kids don't really know. Like, I'm worried about like teams with like one trick characters, right? Like, you want to see your player play their best character, and like if you're invested in a team, like Overwatch specifically, right? You want to watch your players play at their top level, and if they get banned and they're benched, are you going to be happy with that kind of experience as a viewer?
But it was more that there was less diversity before because heroes were banned because they weren't
Of
meta, and
course.
they weren't meta for the whole season because something else was. So you get more variety from banning characters actually because it just opens up more strats.
Yeah, you'll see more strategies being implemented, but like, is it interesting to watch when like a team can't get it together and just gets bodied because they were used to a certain, like, it really depends on how the league as a whole implements it. But I am 100% for.
Entertainment value.
Yeah, definitely. You have to try to. It's a. At the end of the day, this is a business, and you want people to enjoy watching your league, regardless of the competitive integrity. Like, the whole reason we're here is because of money, right? Like, everybody wants to win, and like, if they weren't getting paid an exorbitant amount of money, they wouldn't be like happy with playing in those leagues for the most part. So like, you gotta. It's a balance, right? You want your viewers to have a good time, and like that's where your money comes from. So you want to make your viewers happy, but
Yeah.
depending on how they implemented, I wouldn't say that like hero pools are bad inherently, but as long as they implement it correctly and like with their tournament system now, I think that they really have winning.
I'm gonna play a
formula.
devil's advocate really quickly on you're saying like the quality of matches going down and just like the viewer
It's not
experience.
consistent.
I
Yeah.
mean, for hero pools, I'd say without hero pools, where there's those long stinted metas, I think the quality of matches goes up at the highest end.
Yes.
Because you see those crazy Vancouver, San Francisco games. Those were some
certain people will master the meta.
Yeah,
and
those
you get to
were
see that at the highest level.
like absolutely
Yes.
fantastic to watch. But when you were watching like again the Shock versus like who, again going with the Uprising because they've been so trashed
Like
outside
Houston
yeah,
was
or
awful and
Houston,
good.
yeah, exactly. Two team bottom of the barrel against a top tier team, it wasn't fun. It was just miserable. You wanted that game to end.
Well,
But
it
also,
was so annoying because you'd want them to like try something new, but because like they were just such meta slaves that they would just run a comp that they were obviously worse than the best person that runs that comp, then just run their head into the wall. But it's like try something new, like, but they're afraid to.
You can really see the quality of organizations in this setup, and it's just like it's so new that like I feel like a lot of people are gonna have to adjust or pivot into that, like even just your roster build, right? Like, you pick on meta pick for the season, and then they throw in now
they
hero
really
pools.
screwed the league screwed the orgs because they announced hero pools like a month before the season started, and every team had already built their teams. It's like they were preparing for one meta, and it's just like, do you want them to be like? Do you want teams to be building like adaptable teams, or do you want them players that can master the current style? Like it affects your roster building.
I think that it's better too. Like, honestly, I think about it from like like if you're like if you're a one trick, whatever your character is.
It could be your week. You don't know.
Yeah, it could be your week, but also too like think about your job security. Now they're like everybody wants an all around player, right? That's the meta now as far as like picking professionals. Like, you're not going to be able to just carry on like, all right, this season is my season, and then you might have to take a bow.
I mean,
you know what I'm saying? Like, you have it really shows like the quality of the organizations when you have like such a deep roster versus like you don't have somebody to play the meta that we have. Whatever.
Well, we saw that with like a bunch of like highlight like star names from the season 1 into season 2 who have like most of them have retired or basically like switched into coaching or streaming.
I mean, like Pine the Widow God isn't gonna be doing much in a GOAT season, like.
But I mean, like these points have been like hammered in a lot from just various sources. But I've a point I want to bring up is kind of like on the viewership experience. Going Overwatch is extremely difficult to like just jump in if like you haven't been playing the game since launch, or like if you're a new viewer, you see it on YouTube somehow. You're one of those rare unicorns that somehow finds the Overwatch League without going to actively searching for it. you watch a game, you have no prior knowledge of it. Maybe you just like heard of it from a friend, and like it's a super complex game to like get into and like watch from first person view. Like League is very difficult to watch if you're new, but like at least you're in third person. You're kind of like a god view looking down on people. You can see where people are, basic positioning and understanding. But with like Overwatch, you're first person. Everything's just like in your face. Very high tempo game. I think with having these long stinted metas, and if like someone is hooked in and like watching repeated games, I feel like they're better able to pick up on the nuances that are happening in the game, and to like I think that might be a better um, retention rate for new people coming into the scene. Where with hero pools, that changing things up, and you have to keep track of like who's in, who's not in, why aren't these people playing this character, blah blah blah, why are they playing certain characters against this other character. That might be like even more variables for a new person to keep track of, and just be like, I'm out, this is too much for me, I'm gonna go watch something that I already know, I'm gonna go watch some battle royale
Real
or something.
quick, Blake, can you like mute yourself if you're not talking? I'm riding the waves with you right now.
Yeah, that's what I was saying before. I'm like,
It wasn't bad until we started, but
Yeah.
but to Jake's point, I don't know. It's hard because I don't think anyone's like stumbling across Overwatch League. Like even it's just hard. Like you said, it's hard to follow regardless. And banning certain heroes, like I think you're shooting yourself in the foot. Like you're betraying your core audience by switching up the by dumbing it down and making it have to be the same week to week for in case a new person happens to stumble upon it. But you really want to keep the fans you do have interested, engaged by creating like a less stale viewing experience for them. And I don't think anyone's watching Overwatch League if they don't play Overwatch. So I think you gotta that they should understand it. You know, it's hard to understand otherwise.
But then,
yeah, I also think too that you're going to learn the fundamentals of Overwatch versus like learning a meta. So like these viewers will retain longer over time because they understand how the game works, and watching it change week to week or whatever the meta changes are, they'll actually learn how the game works versus like, okay, this is dive comp and all I understand is dive comp and now it's scope meta and now I can't. I don't understand what's happening. So you might drop off.
Yeah, like who tuned in and saw like 3 tanks and 3 supports last year and like, is this Overwatch? I don't like that wouldn't.
What is happening?
So, and I think there are like certain styles that persist, like dive and deathball and stuff like that. But I think it's just more interesting for everyone in general if you can see like teams being able to play to their strength and they're capable of doing it without getting rolled by the meta comp because of hero pools and the less certainty that teams have. When it came to like people wanted bans before hero pools, but like Jeff Kaplan and people said that it's like you watch Overwatch League, kind of like what Blake was saying, to watch your favorite player play their best hero, and it's like if they have a God Genji on their team, the other team's just gonna ban them every week. So it's like you don't want to keep you don't want to put it in the players' hands because it'll get boring, but then you have the randomness factor of just leaving the league's hands. Like they had a cat pick the bans one weekend.
Yeah, the early implementations were not the greatest at all.
I don't, but now they say it's an algorithm, but I'm pretty sure they're just like hand picking it because like they're a lot better than they used to be, and I think that's what they should do. They can lie and say it's an algorithm, but it's just like this week was like May Orisa, and it's like
it's still the cat.
It's still the cat. It's just on the camera.
Yeah. Hey, that was the most entertaining hero pool drawing they had. Some of them are funny where they just like kept drawing the same character every time and just banned like all his fans
4 weeks.
Well, nobody wants to watch that, so.
Some of them like it.
Cool.
They really go off the personalities of the casters because they've been really relying on those with all these like online pauses and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the San Francisco Shock coaches said that they actually prefer the like getting the week in advance of hero pools rather than having teams select them like day of, because it's like your whole week of practice could be thrown out if like your strategy gets boned. So it's like, and Overwatch already has such a high demand with like the multiple maps and like constant balance changes that throw everything out of whack. So we really have to try to not kill these players because there's already such a high turnover and a lot of burnout, and it's probably only increasing with hero pools. Like, you have a new meta to learn and master every week, so that's another factor.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be hard balance, but I think that it's a mentality change for the community as a whole, and you'll see a lot less burnout. But like for the current pros, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people retire after the season, just because of how difficult this is. Like, good thing too. Not to say that this is actually a good thing, but like them not having to travel. Imagine they also had to travel during this, and they were doing homestands and everything. Like no one would be coming back. No one would come back.
So
Players were already getting
so
sick when they were doing them in the beginning. It's like they would have been just like burnt
it's
dry.
so demanding. It's so demanding. Then trying to learn a new meta every single week, it would have never.
Yeah, coaches are going crazy.
So going off that, how do you think once eventually everything goes back to being offline and having those in-person live events, how do you think the best way would be to kind of merge the traveling, the live events and the tournament structure with hero pools, without hero pools? Because John Spector recently released like his kind of mini update on like his thinking on the next season. And for me, I think I think the homestands every weekend having like, I don't know, I think kind of diminishes it, especially if you have shitty teams
much.
like Washington having 5 homestands. No one's going to come to the 5th one, no matter who's playing. It's just like, Washington's going to be there one of those games.
It's funny, in power rankings, people were putting Washington like higher up because they have so many home games, but they lost every one of their home.
Oh yeah, they got destroyed.
Yeah.
Destroyed all of them, but yeah, go ahead.
So I'm thinking maybe you have just a few, like maybe 3 or 5, probably maybe 5, like major.
They've
like
been talking about
homestands?
doing like regions, like and like moving the teams around, and like kind of like how they had stages. Like, all right, for this stage, it'll be like the West Coast, the East Coast, and the Asia regions, and you'll have like these 7 teams in each one, and then you'll take some of them and you'll mix it up again. So there's like less traveling, and you can still. But the whole point of the homestands was for these teams to make their money back and be able to host these live events. And if they're just like, they're gonna like, oh, sorry about that, end up being too much trouble for the players and staff. Like the orgs aren't gonna like that. They paid like 50 million to get in for this.
They built stadiums.
Some of them, yeah.
Yep.
Some of them, yeah. All right. So like, honestly, I think it's more of the organization as a whole. Like the Overwatch League needs to stop having such a stranglehold on the tournaments themselves. Like if you did divisions, you would cut down a lot on travel time, and then you allowed them to also have tournaments outside the regular league. They could use those stadiums and like actually grow their home audience like they want, and maybe the players would be worth it to them to travel that much. But as it stands right now, it's honestly like an impossible task for a lot of these kids. You're traveling almost triple the distance. You're traveling the globe for some of these, like
China.
I don't want to fly 14 hours and then have to play a game the next day and then fly back and then have to practice, like who's going to ask that?
And all the teams have to like provide practice facilities for the teams visiting them. It's just like, and there's already problems with that already. There were like one team was complaining that Dallas or whatever didn't give them their necessary practice time. So it just like adds a lot more logistical mess. I think I hope the success of online tournaments this year, for the most part, lets them do more of those. Like I think you can still have the travel, but not if you have to travel every week to play.
Separate, You use those for like ticket sales, and then like you supplement it like what I was saying before, like with smaller tournaments, like they can use their venue, But like the online tournaments, like it should be either a separate circuit or like the beginning of the season is online, and then when it starts to become like these are the finals, do those live, because that's when your viewership is going to be super high too.
Because those are where people are going to care. Who's gonna like they're regional, so you don't know what team's gonna be in the finals and who's gonna like even these smaller tournaments mid-season. Like how are they supposed to decide who gets to host it when your team might not even make it? Like, and won't that?
Yeah, I mean,
like people want to come to see their regional team. That was the whole point.
Yeah, it's hard. They're in such a tough situation because
They
like
kind of shot
online,
themselves with this global,
yeah,
global league.
Well, what if they did it like they split it
yeah.
like say there's 8 teams and maybe 5 of them have to be from your division or so, and then you get each one has like three teams that are visiting from whatever other
Yeah, I
region.
think that's kind of the way to go, is where you have the teams like travel
Hmm.
not constantly, but like
Hmm.
once, stay there for a month or
Yeah,
so, and then go
and if
back to
and
their
to
home region.
alleviate like maybe one, say Houston is hosting one of these, but Dallas doesn't, but they're in the same. I know they're not in the same division or region.
Yeah,
Was
that's so
which
stupid.
Yeah, but let's assume they are just for this
Yeah.
example. Um, Kind of going what the NFL does. It's like where all the teams share profits. So like even if like if you're in that division, you share a percentage of that revenue amongst all the teams in that region. So even if you're not hosting it, you do get some money back for the investors.
Yeah, these huge buy-ins are really put a restraint on them. Like I've seen people suggest that they do more like the soccer leagues do, where if your team isn't performing, you get like knocked down to the next tier, but you can't do that
No,
because Boston paid mucho bucks to be in this. You can't be like, oh, sorry. Like they're already suffering enough because like no one wants to root for a bottom team, but it hurts the overall competitiveness of the league
mhm.
when they just have to stick around, even though most contenders teams could beat them.
Yeah.
But let's talk about like the current system they have, because they've made some, I think, some really good changes to the hero pools. Like so they originally they were even ranked, but they took those out. Now it's only an Overwatch League. But they also, extending the hero pools from 1 week to 2 week durations lets an actual meta build, instead of just like, all right, guess this 1 week, and then it's like, no, you have more tape to study, and like hopefully you can put on better performances at least in the second week from what you originally had. And then they also added the tournaments, which so the way it's, you do 3 weeks of seeding rounds of the regular season that determine your tournament seeding at the end of the month, which have no hero pools. And then I think that's been a huge thing, because the original league was just such a long slog of having to like, it's like 40 matches or something crazy. Like it's gonna get old. Like
Yeah, it did get
like
old.
Yeah, it's a lot of games to watch the same game over and
Mhm.
over again.
yeah, but like at least you can, like, I liked how they had the stages originally. At least it was broken into four
Hmm.
different sections, but they got rid of it, and I was like, but then they in spirit brought it back now with these like monthly tournaments. So it's like building up to something, and I think the best part of it is like you can definitively know who is the best, and like at this time period, at this meta, and like you get to see the top teams play when maybe the schedules won't match up to make that happen. So you really get to see who the top dog is, and that creates narratives.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's also cool, like with a 2 week meta too. You watch them workshop it in the
Yeah.
first week. Like, all right, they're willing to try, and then like next week we're definitely going to win it because we'll have it down pat. Like it's interesting to see them workshop ideas in the current
Hmm.
meta.
Yeah, you get to see what the coaching staff actually, if they're
Hmm.
actually
You
worth
really get
worth
to
their
see
money.
the exactly.
Mhm.
All right, we can do final thoughts. So I mostly like hero pools because it forces teams to shift out of the meta. Like professional teams are always going to play what's best slash easiest, like most bang for their buck, and
Mhm.
that's how these metas form, because they don't want to risk like completely flaming out with a bad guess. But this kind of forced them off their comfort, and it also just changes the like mental state of like how you view the meta, because um maybe you wouldn't try something different, but now that you have to, when the hero pools go away for the tournaments or whatever, or the playoffs, now you're like, okay, I'm more familiar with this style, so maybe I can try this out and see if it works, even though it isn't considered like the most optimal.
Yeah, I definitely think it gives flexibility built into the community, and then too, like also do hiring right with the orgs. It
Hmm.
gives them like you really focus on flex players versus like one tricks that just happen to be meta this season.
Which
So
I
you're
think is
definitely gonna
good.
see.
You
Yeah.
want
Yeah,
these like
I
players to be the best.
Mhm.
yeah definitely, and like like they're gonna hire kids that are consistently good. So like your consistency is the most valuable thing to you as a player. So like you'll see as the league goes on through time, it's just gonna get better and better. I really think that they have a winning formula with how they set it up now.
Yeah. I completely agree. Just having, I think having the overall flex DPS instead of a McCree specialist is just like infinitely more valuable. There's a couple characters like Widowmaker where you can just hire a Widow one trick who, because that is just the nature of that character. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just like how that character works that you're allowed to get away with that. Like it's tougher to do it with like Chipsa and being a Doom one trick, even though he adamantly like fights that he's not, but he is. Um,
He's played Hanzo before. What do you
I
mean?
mean,
Yeah, what do you mean?
yeah, exactly. But like
I do think Doomfist is one of those characters that it's borderline, but it's just like you can have a specialist on it. And if it is ever
it's
meta, it's just less likely.
he's infinitely more easy to shut down than a Widowmaker. But going off of, like just being able to experiment and having these hero pools, we would have seen Super come back in. They were and being the Genji DPS this past weekend. That was fantastic. I think it's going to draw a lot of eyes back into the league, especially from people who like maybe just like for whatever reason stopped watching, and then like they hear that, and Super's one of the most well-known names within the community. They're like, oh, what's this? He's not on Ryan. They might come back just to see that, and maybe they'll be a more consistent
Yeah, dude,
viewer.
these big teams need to be like doing more fan service. Like I like
Yeah.
it. Like, the Shock are like 16-2. They're going against Boston, who's like 2-13. Play your main tank player on DPS.
Yeah.
Do it.
Like if you look at
yeah, you want to see the Instagram posts. You want to see something crazy for social. Like, come on, you gotta work it. You gotta work it out here. And I
Memes
think
get dollars, man.
exactly. Like
yeah, exactly.
take this past I think it was last weekend and this weekend of LCS Cloud9, clearly the best team in NA, and they were highly experimenting with people playing certain champions and like not banning other ones, and just allowing like it was the 100 Thieves game that they lost their first loss this split. They let the Olaf go to 100 Thieves and blah 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 blah. They lost, and they're like they can shake it off because they're the best one, and they're creating some wacky picks to prepare themselves for Worlds because they're 99% chance for sure going to Worlds. So they're
I like when teams do that to have something in their back pocket. Like even if it isn't going to work out, then it's like maybe they can pull it out.
There's games they can throw
something.
away. So like the Shock Boston game, they can throw it away, and if it means just building up that experience and confidence in like, oh yeah, we got back pocket Genji Super. You know,
They're never gonna play that though. That was just straight.
I know, but maybe he gets like super good. You never know.
He's been grinding on ranked. I
They've
saw
been practicing it.
He DM'd his coach like begging him. Krusty posted the pics of the DMs like, bro, my Genji's been so good.
I mean,
I'm
well,
killing it on
to be
ranked."
fair, he has some of the best supporting cast to prop him up. Like Striker Smurf hard carried his ass. So I mean, there's that.
Like when you have the best players on every other role, it doesn't really matter if you're an average Genji.
So, I mean, yeah, but top teams just gotta create some content, and if that means taking a loss here or there, it's gonna pay off in the long run.
Because you know you're all gonna be losing money when the league goes down for being boring. So
and that's why hero pools are good. Done. Final.
Be entertaining. That is it.
Yeah, that's why we're doing it.
But we are the Infamy Fantasy Esports team. We're hosting Fantasy Fortnite tournaments at infamy.gg for the next few months. So check it out, and we'll see you next time.